Hi, I'm Madison, 2 months ago. I opened the drawer where I kept my engagement ring, the one James, my late fiancé, spent years saving to design with me. It was gone. My mother was rinsing her coffee mug when she said, "Oh, we sold it." Sienna needed time to heal in Bali. They sold a $610,000 ring like it was just clutter. No warning, no apology, just silence. And a legal envelope on my pillow. But what they didn't know, what they never saw coming, was what I'd do next. Before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever been treated like you didn't matter by the people who were supposed to protect you? Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I read everyone. It had been exactly 2 years since James Callahan died in the parking lot of a small diner on the edge of town, holding a box of blackberry pie and a voicemail I never got to return. Friday morning in Asheville looked ordinary. Quiet light pushing through the blinds, dust resting in corners, everything untouched. I sat at the edge of the bed with one sock on, the other forgotten in my hand, trying not to count backward. My hand moved before I had time to think. Second drawer, always the same place. The velvet box was supposed to be there, navy blue, soft, with a stitched daisy in the corner. It had lived there for months, unmoved, but not forgotten. Except today. It was gone. I opened the drawer wider, moved tissues, a few receipts, the candle stub I never threw away, still nothing. I checked the next drawer, nothing. The back, nothing, not even the cloth. But the knowing had already settled in my stomach. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something lost. This was something taken. I stood, walked slowly down the stairs, hand firm on the railing, not because I was unsteady, but because I needed the banister to keep me from screaming. In the kitchen, my mother stood at the counter flipping through a magazine. She didn't look up when she said, "Morning." Her voice was too casual. I knew the answer before I asked. "Mom," I said calmly, "do you know where my ring is?" She turned a page. "What ring? The one James gave me." There was a pause. Then she took a sip of her coffee. "Oh, that. We sold it." It landed like a crack across the ribs. She said it as if it were a grocery item we no longer needed. Sienna needed help with her retreat, the one in Bali. "You weren't wearing it anyway." I didn't respond. The silence wasn't out of shock. It was containment. My father stepped in from the hallway, arms folded, voice tired in the way people get when they've already made peace with their discomfort. "You hadn't touched it in months. Madison, we figured you'd moved on." That phrase again. Moved on. Like I'd misplaced something and forgotten to go back for it. "You sold something that wasn't yours," I said evenly. He gave a half shrug. "Technically." "No," I interrupted. "James and I chose that ring together. He designed it with me. He had it engraved." My mother rolled her eyes. "It's not like you're still getting married." The room didn't go quiet. It had already been quiet. But something in me went still in a way I hadn't felt in years. James wasn't gone in theory. He was gone in fact. His body was cold in a parking lot while I sat in traffic with a bouquet on the seat beside me. They hadn't just sold a ring. They'd sold the last thing he ever put in my hands. The last thing that said I was something more than just their daughter. I turned and walked away without another word. My steps deliberate. My breath slow. Each stair creaked like it knew the weight of what had been taken. And as I reached the top, I didn't cry. I simply opened the empty drawer again, stared at what remained, and felt something sharper than sadness begin to take root. Not anger, not grief, just clarity. They let it go because they never understood what it was. By Sunday night, I still hadn't left my room. The silence had shifted from unsettling to familiar. I hadn't eaten much. Some crackers, maybe half a bottle of water. But grief, I'd learned, had a way of dulling both hunger and the sense of time. My phone had been off since Friday morning, like I was afraid of what might be waiting for me on the other side of the screen. But eventually, I turned it on, not because I was ready, just because I was tired of hiding. The lock screen lit up, and there it was, Sienna's face, centered, glowing, backlit by morning sun. She sat on a wooden yoga deck, legs folded perfectly, palms pressed together. A garland of frangipani flowers circled her neck. The caption read, "Healing is expensive, but so worth it. Grateful to my amazing family for believing in my journey." Heart emoji, lotus flower. The comments were pouring in. "You inspire me. This is what real growth looks like." She's glowing. Actual light. I stared at the screen until my hands started trembling. I didn't cry. That was the part that scared me. It was like there was nowhere left for the grief to go. She was using James's ring, his money, to fund this new identity, and no one knew. No one even asked. I scrolled down, and it got worse. She was tagged in brand stories, reposted by wellness influencers, quoted in a blog, From Pain to Purpose, Sienna Quinn's Healing Evolution. There was a paragraph about generational trauma, another about the courage it took to leave behind what no longer serves you. Not a word about me, not a word about what it cost. While she stretched into the Bali sunrise, I was sleeping on the floor of my childhood bedroom, because the bed I bought after James died had been given away. Too big for one person, they'd said. I kept scrolling, but my mind was already somewhere else, flashing back through years of slammed doors and whispered comparisons. The way my mother used to look at me after every one of Sienna's tantrums, sighing like it was my job to make everything okay. "You're the strong one. Madison, help me keep the peace." That line had followed me into adulthood like a leash disguised as praise. James once told me, "You don't always have to be the one holding the house together while it burns." But I guess I didn't hold it tight enough, because now they were dancing in the fire, and I was the smoke they never bothered to name. Around 8:30, I finally got dressed. Sweatshirt, jeans, no makeup. I drove in silence to the cemetery. The wind had picked up. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. I walked the narrow path between the stones with nothing in my hands but my phone and a weight in my chest that hadn't lightened since Friday. When I reached James's name etched in marble, I didn't kneel. I just stood. "They used your ring," I whispered. "They sold it so she could post gratitude quotes in Bali." The wind rustled the dried leaves at my feet. Something in me cracked again, but quietly, like the seam had always been there, waiting. Back home, I sat on the floor again, scrolling. Sienna's latest post had almost 2,000 likes, a drone shot over rice fields. She was mid-spin, arms outstretched, white linen billowing. The caption, "Sometimes you have to leave the noise to find your soul." And before I could stop myself, before shame could catch up, I typed hope the healing was worth it. I paid for it. I hit send. The comment vanished into the sea of praise. 10 minutes later, it was gone, deleted. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Let your sister have this moment. Don't start drama." Drama. That's what they call it now. Not betrayal, not erasure, just drama. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen, rereading her message until the words started to lose meaning. Then I scrolled up and looked at Sienna's face again. A face that had learned to weaponize other people's silence. People think grief is loud. They think it looks like wailing, or broken dishes, or storming out of rooms. But it's not. Grief is being erased slowly while the world claps for the person holding the eraser. I wasn't trying to start drama. I just didn't want to disappear again. The drive to the cemetery was quiet. I didn't play music. I didn't need the distraction. The silence was doing enough. Outside, Asheville had gone gray. The sky stretched flat, trees motionless. The kind of weather that doesn't cry, but still feels like morning. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. The sound was too familiar now. Gravel under my shoes. The slow rhythm of breath I had to remind myself to take. I walked without looking at the names. Not because they didn't matter, but because only one did. James Callahan. There wasn't a bench nearby, and I didn't bring flowers. I just stood, hands in the pockets of my coat, the wind tugging lightly at the ends of my sleeves. I stared at the stone and tried to imagine him speaking. What he might say if he saw all of this. If he knew the ring we chose together was now funding someone else's transformation. My voice came out small, steady. "They used your ring. James." It didn't echo. It didn't need to. There was no one around to hear it but the wind. and maybe that was enough. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I wanted to. But there was something colder in me now, the kind of pain that didn't ask for permission. It just sat there. I remembered how careful he was when he held that little box, how he insisted on picking the setting himself, how he wanted it to feel like me. Simple, strong, honest, he said. Just like you. I hadn't worn it since the funeral, but it still felt like it belonged to me, even now, even without it. I stayed a few more minutes, then turned and walked back the same way I came. Back to the car, back to the house that no longer felt like home. That night, after I sent the comment, hoped the healing was worth it, I paid for it. I didn't expect anything. I just needed to put it somewhere. But when I saw that it was deleted, something shifted, not rage, just recognition. That even in silence, they found a way to mute me further. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Let your sister have this moment. Don't start drama. There it was. Clean, dismissive, final, drama. That was the word they reached for. Not grief, not lost, not the quiet erasure of what James and I had. Just drama. As if telling the truth was an act of chaos. As if pain was only valid when it was someone else's. I didn't respond. I sat on the floor again. Legs crossed beneath me. Phone resting face down beside my knee. I thought about how easily they'd removed me from the story. How Sienna's journey was suddenly ours. How James's ring had become her metaphor. There's a kind of grief that doesn't wail or break things. It just waits. It watches as people rewrite your past and call it growth. And sometimes, it speaks, not to be loud, but to remind itself it still exists. That night, I didn't go back to bed. I stayed on the floor with the lights off, the ceiling barely visible in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just whispered once more to no one in particular. I remember. And that, somehow, was the first real thing I'd said in days. It had been 3 days since my comment disappeared from Sienna's post. 3 days since my mother decided silence was the appropriate response to betrayal. As long as it didn't ruin brunch. I hadn't spoken much since then. Not out of fear. Just preservation. Some words don't deserve to be wasted twice. That morning, I sat at the same kitchen table I'd eaten cereal at since I was 7. The chair still creaked the same way when I leaned back. The walls still carried the smell of over-toasted bread. And yet, nothing about this place felt familiar anymore, except the small manila folder waiting in front of me, neatly closed, labeled with my name in my mother's handwriting. Inside a formal letter from Monroe and Taylor LLP, the law firm we used after James died. This correspondence confirms that all items and furnishings currently within the property located at 218 Waverly Drive fall under the full legal ownership of Mr. Robert and Mrs. Linda Quinn. I stopped reading. It wasn't just a legal notice. It was a declaration, a rewriting. They didn't just take the ring. They wanted me to know that nothing in this house belonged to me. Not the dresser James helped assemble the first summer we moved back. Not the bed they gave away. Not even the space I was standing in. I looked up. My father was stirring his coffee, carefully avoiding my eyes like the news was too mundane to meet me in the face. "If you keep going like this," he said calmly, "you're going to ruin your own peace. We can't undo what's done." I wanted to laugh, or throw the letter, or ask how long he'd been practicing that line. But instead, I just said what I knew to be true. "You can't undo it," I said. "But you can acknowledge what it was." He sighed, folded the newspaper with careful hands, then finally looked at me. "Madison, you've been living here for 2 years, rent-free. We've given you more than enough. It's just a ring." He slid a second envelope across the table. White, thin, gold-embossed letterhead, the same law firm, the same indifferent weight. It felt cold even before I touched it. I didn't open it in front of him. I didn't give him that power. Later. After the rain came and the house settled into one of those quiet spells it used to save for Sunday afternoons. I walked out to the garage, not sure what I was looking for, only that it had to be something that was mine. The air smelled like old paint and winter. Dust floated where light leaked through the small window. I found the crate labeled Madison College, pulled it out slowly, careful not to crack the plastic. Inside a stack of yearbooks, a stretched out hoodie from freshman year, an old guitar strap I never learned to use, and beneath all of it, an envelope, small, cream-colored, my name on the front, James's handwriting, careful, slanted slightly to the right. I didn't remember seeing it before. I opened it with both hands, like it might fall apart if I blinked. Inside a single sticky note. The ink had faded slightly, but not enough to miss the words. Don't let them take your voice or your worth. That was it. No signature, no punctuation, just him. Just exactly what I needed. I stood there in the cold garage holding that tiny square of truth like it was the only thing in the world I trusted. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't dramatic. It was a reminder. A command. I folded the note and slipped it behind my driver's license. Not for safekeeping, but for remembering. Because that was the part they never expected. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't building a case. I was remembering who I was. Before they convinced me I was lucky just to be quiet. That night, the house was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that soothes, but the kind that lingers too long in the corners. My parents had gone to bed. The dishwasher hummed softly downstairs. I sat on the floor with my knees pulled in, the garage dust still faintly on my sleeves. The letter from James stayed tucked behind my ID. I kept touching it, just to know it was still there. I wasn't sure what I needed, only that I needed something to explain how it got this far, why it was so easy for them to take, why no one looked back. So I went digging. There was a bin in the back of my closet, clear plastic, brittle at the edges, labeled in my mother's handwriting M. Childhood. It cracked slightly as I pulled it out. Inside old birthday cards, broken crayons, a stack of mini DV tapes. I hadn't seen them in years. I plugged in the camcorder. The screen lit up blue, then flickered to gray static. I flipped through the tapes until one caught my eye, labeled in faded ink Madison's 6th birthday. I pressed play. It opened on a backyard scene, paper streamers, plastic tablecloths, a chocolate-frosted cake with 6 candles. I was wearing a yellow sundress I had begged my mother for. I remembered that. I said it made me feel like sunshine, and then, Sienna, taller, 8 years old, already knowing where the camera was. She grinned, leaned forward, and without warning shoved my head straight into the cake. Frosting splattered, my arms flailed, my small hands wiped icing from my eyes. The camera shook with laughter. Oh my God. Sienna, my mother said, laughing more than scolding. My father's voice joined in, warm and amused. Classic. Get a picture. Little me looked up, cake in my eyelashes, silence in my mouth. I scanned the room. No one moved. I paused the tape. The frame froze on my face. There was frosting in my hair, confusion in my eyes, a smile trying to form because no one else looked upset. Because even then, I knew my job was to keep it together. Not cry, not make a scene, just laugh it off. I stared at that image for a long time. That was the first version of the role they handed me. Not the birthday girl, not the center of the moment, just the calm one, the good one, the one who could take a hit, frosting, words, silence, and still help everyone else feel okay. James once asked me if I ever got tired of being the responsible one. I said no, but that wasn't the truth. I just didn't think I had a choice. Watching that tape, I understood something no one ever said out loud. My pain was never a reason to stop the party. It was something to work around, something I was expected to manage, quietly. I powered off the camcorder, slid the tape back into its case, not to hide it, but to admit it happened. It wasn't just a birthday prank, it was a blueprint, and I had followed it for 27 years. The day after I watched the birthday tape, the house moved with the same polite silence it always wore when no one wanted to talk about anything real. My parents tiptoed around me. Meals came and went. Dishes were washed. Doors clicked softly shut. I kept my distance, until that evening, when there was a knock on my bedroom door, a soft, rehearsed kind of knock. Then the door opened without waiting for a response. It was my mother. She stepped in holding a small navy box, one of those velvet ones that always meant something symbolic, or at least tried to. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine as she crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing her skirt like we were about to have a scene from a family drama she didn't know she'd been writing for years. I was cleaning out the closet. she said quietly. Found these. Your Nana had always said she wanted you to have them. Figured. Maybe now's a good time. She opened the box. A pair of pearl drop earrings. Delicate and familiar. I remembered them from holidays. Nana used to wear them when she wanted to feel elegant. They were beautiful. Classic. But the moment didn't feel like comfort. It felt like performance. I blinked, unsure of what role she wanted me to play this time. She didn't mean to hurt you. Sweetie, my mother said, still not really looking at me. Sienna just handles things differently. I didn't answer. I looked at the earrings, clean, gleaming, cold. We thought you'd moved on from all that, she added. All that. Like grief was a shoebox that belonged in the attic. Like James's name was a season we'd all outgrown. I almost said thank you. I almost reached for them. I almost let the familiarity of pearls dull the sharp edge of everything else. But then my phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Natalie. Just 3 words. Thought you should see this. She attached a link. I tapped it. It was an Instagram story. Sienna again. Same deck in Bali. Same lighting that made everything look expensive and sacred. She sat cross-legged, a pale smoothie in hand, sunlight turning her hair to gold. Her voice came syrup smooth. Practiced. Forgiveness is so powerful, she said, smiling gently. Even when people lash out, I know it's just their pain talking. I rise above. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. The earrings in the box, the cloth in her lap, the ring they sold, the story she erased and repackaged as sainthood. My silence had become her marketing strategy, my restraint, her redemption arc. She had turned my grief into a backdrop for her glow-up. I stared at the screen until the story looped, then set the phone down. The screen went dark, but my reflection stayed. My mother stood, gave my shoulder a light touch, like we'd shared something tender. Try to get some rest, she said, as if what I needed was a nap, not the truth. She left the earrings on the nightstand and closed the door behind her. I didn't move, just sat there, in the quiet, in the bruise of another moment I didn't ask for. I looked at the pearls once more and felt nothing warm, because they weren't an inheritance, they were an exchange, a peace offering disguised as memory. And I had finally learned the difference. That night, after my mother left and the door clicked shut, I didn't reach for the earrings. I didn't wrap them in tissue paper or place them in a drawer. I just stared at the box, untouched on the nightstand, like it was humming with something I didn't want to name. My chest felt hollow, not from shock anymore, but from the slow erosion of being misrepresented over and over again, and still expected to smile for it. I opened my laptop. The screen lit up the room with that cold kind of blue, the kind that makes even familiar spaces feel distant. My desktop was cluttered with old documents I hadn't touched in months. But I didn't open any of them. I created a new folder. I named it Truth. Not in all caps, not bold, just quiet, direct, enough. Then I stood up, walked over to the bin under my bed, and pulled out the box I hadn't opened since James's memorial. Inside were receipts, legal papers, insurance documents, a copy of Nana's will, and a letter from James's mother, thanking me, in her soft handwriting, for caring for the ring until it becomes part of your next chapter together. Her words hadn't aged. They still felt present, still true. I placed the letter gently on the scanner, fed it through, watched the light pass over each line like it was retracing something sacred. Then came the ring receipt, the date stamped clearly, 3 months before James passed, the email chain confirming the appraisal, a notarized letter from Monroe and Taylor, verifying the ring as joint property with deferred transfer of ownership, defaulted to me. Every document I scanned felt like a stitch, not to repair, just to hold. I found the inheritance letter from Nana, the one listing the earrings next to my name in her careful cursive. I scanned that too. Then I took screenshots of Sienna's deleted post, of her caption, of the Bali footage, the carefully crafted phrases about forgiveness and rebirth, the comments calling her brave, the tags from yoga brands building her image in real time. Then I opened the podcast. The episode started with light music, then her voice, clear, soft, calculated. Sometimes, she said, you have to release the roles people force you into. I didn't blink, just listened. She went on about walking away from generational pain, about choosing light, about letting go of objects that hold emotional debt. Her voice made my skin tighten. She was talking about the ring, about me, about my silence. 50,000 people had streamed that episode. 50,000 strangers had heard a version of my story that didn't belong to her. A version cleaned of context and sold back as her redemption. I downloaded the episode and dragged the file into the folder. Then I sat there, hands resting on the keyboard, watching the files pile up. Not as ammunition, not as a case, just as proof. Not for anyone else. For me. Because I had spent years giving people the benefit of the doubt, letting moments slide, thinking silence was strength. But silence without witness becomes erasure, and I wasn't going to be erased anymore. I didn't know what I was building. Not yet. But I knew the shape of it. It was mine. All of it. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough to begin. By the time the rain started tapping against the windows, the file labeled Truth had grown thick. Receipts, letters, screenshots, audio clips, all of it stacked in digital rows like quiet bricks. I hadn't spoken a word to anyone in hours. The house was asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, no one knocked. Around 10 p.m. I grabbed my coat and keys. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just needed to scan a few things James had written near the end. Letters mostly. His handwriting had started to change during those last months. Slower, less sure, but still his. I didn't want to fold them or crease them or risk losing anything in translation. There was a coffee shop downtown that stayed open late, and more importantly, had a scanner in the back. No questions, no conversations. The drive was silent, wipers brushing slowly across the glass, like even the car was trying not to intrude. When I walked into the cafe, the barista nodded without a word. I ordered a plain black tea and found a corner table near the back. I opened the manila folder and slid the first letter into the scanner. His handwriting moved across the page like a memory I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. I love how you see people, one line said, even when they forget how to see you. My hand hovered over the page. Pressed flat. This wasn't about getting justice. It wasn't even about being heard. I just didn't want to be rewritten. When I got home, the house was quiet again. I stepped into my room, pulled my hair into a knot, and sat cross-legged on the floor near the desk. Next to me, in the top drawer, still folded neatly, was the navy velvet cloth, the one with the white daisies, the one that used to hold the ring. I didn't reach for it right away. Instead, I opened my voice recorder. No script, no plan, just my voice. In the dark. My name is Madison Quinn, I began. I was engaged to James Callahan, 2 years ago. He died, and last week, my parents sold the ring he gave me, without telling me. The money went to support my sister's retreat, her healing, her platform, and no one asked if I was okay with that. I paused, then kept going. The ring wasn't just jewelry, it was a part of him, of us. It held memory, grief, love. They called it just a ring, said I was making drama. But it was never about the ring. It was about losing the last thing I still had permission to keep. I stopped the recording, played it back once, then saved the file, transferred it to a small USB drive, labeled it Quiet Version. I reached for the velvet cloth, folded it around the drive like it used to wrap around the ring, tucked the edges carefully. Some things you wrap not to protect, but to remember. I placed it in my purse, not to carry, just to know it was near. I wasn't ready to confront anyone. Not yet. But something in me had shifted. The kind of shift that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in. Quiet and sure. I wasn't breaking anymore. I was collecting. Not evidence, but truth, memory, voice. And this time, I wasn't going to lose it. Friday evening settled over Asheville like a damp coat. Heavy, close, unwelcome. The sky had held the same dull gray all day, refusing to clear. My parents were out for dinner. Sienna, I assumed, was already in hair and makeup. The house was empty but not quiet. It pulsed with everything unsaid. Upstairs, I stood in front of the mirror and fastened the clasp on a black dress that had no sparkle. No statement, just presence. I didn't wear the earrings. I didn't wear anything borrowed. I slipped the USB wrapped in navy velvet into my clutch, felt the soft resistance of the cloth, and zipped it shut like sealing a letter I already knew would be read. I drove alone. The venue was a restored warehouse just outside the city. Candlelight reflected off tall windows, white lilies floating in glass bowls on every table. But I noticed something immediately. Near the entrance, under soft uplighting, were floral centerpieces made entirely of daisies. My touch, chosen weeks ago, quiet, specific, not Vera's style. I checked in without fanfare, no name tag, no announcement, just a folded program and a brief nod from the coordinator. Across the room, I saw her. Sienna entered with all the certainty of someone who believed this night was hers. She wore white. Of course she did. Her hair pinned high, her walk slow and poised. Vera hovered beside her, whispering praise like a pageant coach. "You deserve this," she said, just loud enough for the champagne table to hear. I didn't hide. I didn't approach. I stood near the wall, tucked into shadow but not secrecy. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to be remembered. The host stepped up to the stage and welcomed the crowd. The usual rhythm followed, clinking silverware, murmured applause. Then came the moment. "Please welcome our surprise speaker, Sienna Quinn." She took the microphone with practiced ease. "Grief," she began, "is a journey, but some people wear it like a badge they refuse to take off." My fingers tightened around the edge of my clutch. She spoke of letting go, of releasing pain, of objects that hold us back. The ring, the silence, the family that couldn't understand her need to grow. She never said my name, but I was in every sentence. When the audience exhaled at her closing line, I chose light. I stepped quietly to the side of the stage where the event coordinator stood behind a small tech booth. "Excuse me," I said softly, handing her the envelope. "This is a donor message. It needs to be played now, before the final speaker." She hesitated. I didn't flinch. "Check the card inside," I added. She opened it. Her eyes scanned the words, then widened slightly. "Yes. Okay. I'll cue it up." I returned to my place. Sienna had just finished thanking the sponsors. The applause swelled. And then, the lights dimmed. The screen behind her flickered to black. White text appeared, "In memory of James Callahan." The room shifted. The video began. It was me, sitting in a chair, speaking directly to the camera, calm, steady. "My name is Madison Quinn," I said. "I don't need recognition tonight. I already had what mattered. And I lost it." The screen changed. An image of James and me, smiling, holding hands. 2 years ago, we designed a ring together, a symbol of our future. That ring was taken from me, sold, without my consent. The money funded someone else's story, a story I was not allowed to exist in. There was no anger in my voice, just clarity. I funded this gala, quietly, in James's name. The theme, reclaiming what was always yours, isn't just about leadership, it's about memory, and the cost of being erased. The screen faded to black again, and the room didn't exhale. It froze. Vera's hand flew to her mouth. Sienna hadn't moved. She stood like she'd been caught mid-step. Someone whispered near the back, "She paid for this." Another followed. That was her fiancé. I didn't stay for whatever came next. I walked toward the doors without turning around. No applause, no confrontation. Just the sound of my heels against the floor, and the weight of 100 people realizing what silence had hidden. Outside, the air was sharp, but it felt clean. And for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel invisible. I just felt done. The next morning, I didn't need to open my eyes to know my phone was already vibrating. I could feel it pulsing on the nightstand like a warning. I reached for it slowly, thumb sliding over the screen before I was ready to look. 38 unread messages, 12 missed calls, notifications stacked like ash, silent, but still burning. The first thing I saw was Sienna's face. Tears, glossy, calculated. She was backlit by soft morning light, her voice trembling just enough to sound unrehearsed. "Last night should have been a celebration," she said, voice cracking. "But I was ambushed. I'm heartbroken. I've worked so hard to forgive, to grow, and instead of support, I was attacked by my own sister. Slide. She weaponized grief. A caption read, beneath a clip of her dabbing at the corner of her eye with a manicured hand. Slide. She never supported my journey. Sometimes family becomes your biggest obstacle. The comments came fast. Wow, this is heartbreaking. She sounds toxic. You deserve peace. Sienna. By noon, 2 local blogs had picked it up. Resilience Coach Faces Family Sabotage at Women's Gala. A photo of Sienna in white beside a cropped still from my video. My face blurred, her pain front and center. Then came the text from my mother. Are you happy now you've broken this family? No punctuation. Just that measured disappointment she always reserved for me. I stared at it for a long time, then blocked her number. A minute later, a message from Lucas came through. Lucas had known James, had known me. Before silence became my default. Don't let them own the final word. You've come too far to be pushed back into the dark. That was enough to get me out of bed. I dressed simply. No makeup, no earrings, just jeans, a navy sweater, and the velvet cloth folded into my jacket pocket. I printed the transcript that morning, an exact copy of Sienna's podcast episode. Her voice in black and white, no edits, no spin. The drive to the family house felt mechanical. I took the turns by muscle memory. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like it had anything left to offer. The front door was cracked open, like it expected me. Inside, Sienna was pacing the living room, her phone pressed to one ear. Her voice strained as she walked circles around herself. It wasn't staged, she muttered. It wasn't. Emotional abuse is real. She stopped when she saw me. You shouldn't be here, she snapped, but her hands trembled. I won't be long, I said, calm. I stepped past her and sat on the edge of the coffee table. Unzipped my bag, pulled out the transcript and the velvet cloth. I unfolded both with care, laid them side by side. What's that? She asked. Your voice, I said softly. The podcast, the one where you called me a grief addict. Her face drained of color, her mouth opened, but nothing came out. You don't understand how media works, she whispered. I understand how truth works. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse. I let the silence fill what was left between us. As I stood to leave, my mother appeared in the hallway. Her expression was unreadable. Not shock, not regret, just blank, like she hadn't expected the moment to end this way. We're family. Madison, she said finally, her voice low, uncertain. Blood, I asked, stopping at the threshold. Blood means nothing without respect. She didn't answer, just stood there, as if the script she'd memorized no longer applied. I'm not here to belong anymore, I said. I'm here to end the cycle. And then I walked past them both, out into the cool afternoon air. No shouting, no drama. Just the sound of the door closing behind me, and the silence they would have to sit in now. I didn't leave to punish them. I left because I finally knew I didn't owe them the right to keep rewriting me. The morning light in Sonoma Hills was different, softer. It didn't pierce, it warmed. A breeze rolled gently off the vineyards, carrying the scent of something clean, like earth starting over. I stood in front of the studio door, key in hand. The small wooden sign above the entrance shimmered faintly in the sun. Callahan and Quinn, crafted with memory. I turned the key, stepped inside. The space wasn't large, but it felt open in a way Asheville never had. The walls were painted a warm cream, the floors a soft wood tone. A row of workbenches faced tall windows that framed the hills like still life. Every tool had its place. Pliers, molds, torches, trays lined with velvet. For the first time in years, I noticed the scent of metal warming under light. It didn't smell like industry. It smelled like resolve. I spent the first week quietly. Customers trickled in. A couple from San Francisco asked about wedding bands with soul. A woman in her 70s brought a faded photograph of her late husband and whispered, "Can you set this in a locket? I want to carry his eyes with me." I said yes, and meant it. Sometimes people didn't say anything at all. They walked slowly through the room, looking, touching the edges of what I'd built. A few recognized me. I could feel it in their hesitation. Their eyes would linger, then lower. "You're the one from the gala." Right, they'd ask in a quiet voice. I nodded, smiled. Nothing more. In the back corner, under a soft spotlight, was a glass case. Inside it, folded perfectly in half, was the navy velvet cloth, no ring, just the cloth. Beside it, a small handwritten card. This piece is not for sale. It cost everything to make. People paused in front of it often. Not long. Just enough. I wanted the studio to be more than a shop. I wanted it to be a space where memory wasn't for sale, where grief wasn't marketing, where nothing was posted just to be admired. Everything in this room had weight, had breath. One afternoon, a little girl came in with her parents. She wandered toward the display case, pressed her nose to the glass, and pointed. "Who made that one?" she asked. I crouched beside her, resting my arms on my knees. "Someone who used to be quiet," I said. She tilted her head. "Are they better now?" I smiled. "Not too wide. Not too quick." "She's still learning," I said. "But she's not quiet anymore." Weeks passed. No calls from Sienna. No messages from my mother. But that was its own kind of answer. And I didn't need more. Then, one Saturday, a short message came from Joanne, a family friend I hadn't spoken to since college. "Saw your tribute at the gala. Your mom never said anything. But..." She kept the video on her desktop. I read the message twice. Then I let it sit. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. Some apologies don't come with words, but that doesn't mean you wait your life to hear them. At the end of the day, I walked to the workbench and opened the top drawer. Inside, next to my tools, were two things: the original receipt for the ring box, yellowed slightly at the edges, and James's note, creased, but intact. "Don't let them take your voice or your worth." I placed them side by side. Outside, the sky was clear. The sun cut across the cobblestones like a line being drawn. And for the first time in a long time, I felt where I was standing. Firm, quiet, mine. The morning air in Sonoma Hills carried a quiet weight, like the world had finally decided not to rush me. I unlocked the front door of the studio just as the first line of sunlight cut across the stone steps. The brass handle was cool in my hand, the kind of cool that reminded you were holding something solid. Inside, everything was where I left it. Tools in place, orders drying on the display shelf, and in the back corner, under glass, the navy velvet cloth still rested, folded in half. It hadn't moved since the day I placed it there. Neither had the card beside it. "This piece is not for sale." I didn't touch it. I just looked. My phone buzzed once, softly, without urgency. It was Joanne. "Just thought you should know. Your mom still keeps the video from the gala. On her desktop. She's never said anything. But it's there." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I needed more. Just because I didn't. No apology. No explanation. Just a quiet fact. And for the first time, that was enough. I walked over to the workbench and slid open the top drawer. Inside were two pieces of paper I'd kept side by side for weeks now, the original receipt for the ring box, slightly worn at the corners, and James's last note. "Don't let them take your voice or your worth." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed in. Let the quiet fill the space without asking it to carry anything. Then I turned the sign on the door to open. Light poured across the floor in slow, steady lines. And in that moment, I knew something I hadn't known in 2 years. I was still here, still mine. And this time, no one got to sell that. I didn't need applause. I didn't need closure on anyone else's terms. I just needed to know that the truth existed somewhere outside their version of me. And now, it does. In a glass case beneath soft light, in a velvet cloth that no longer carries a ring, but carries what mattered more: memory, voice, and choice. They tried to sell the last piece of who I was, but I kept what they couldn't touch. Not to punish, not to prove, just to live, fully, finally, and without their permission. If you've ever had to reclaim your story after being written out of someone else's, drop a comment and let me know, because sometimes healing doesn't look loud. Sometimes it just looks like still being here, on your own terms.